Hey everybody, my presentation is called Language Death, the Art of Dying. My presentation homes in on just language death in the digital context. Um, we learned about this in the introduction to sociolinguistics, and so I found it really fascinating when we were learning about it and searched the web and found an article that talked about language death within digital context. So languages are dying digitally, and they are losing the opportunity to ascend digitally as well, which is super interesting to me. Um, so basically, the way that they measure language death in a digital context is they use the traditional methods of language vitality assessment, and they just apply that into the digital realm. And so um, instead of using a speaker population, they look at just like the online population, um, and then they look at like vigorous online use instead of like vigorous oral use. Um, so the classification system um, that they came up with is a four-way classification system, um, which puts languages into either digitally thriving, vital, heritage, and still languages. And these correspond to the amount of digital communication that takes place in the language. So whether it's just applicable or necessary for communication um, of the community to use it like digitally, to like if digital means further the communication needs of the community or if they don't. And so the four-way classification system, um, so basically like heritage is in that system means that you can still view the language online, like there's archives of it, just like if they're an animal went extinct and you can like see the little drawings or even pictures of them, but doesn't like revive the animal, the species. Same thing with the language. Just because you can view it doesn't mean that it can come back to life. Um, and then still languages are languages that are like on the brink of being heritage languages. Um, and then there's thriving and just like vital languages as well, which basically they're doing good on the online platform. So this article just like really stressed the fact that like once the languages become still languages, it's really hard for them to digitally ascend and to be thriving languages. Um, the article said that 8,000 languages are digitally still and they're no longer capable of digital ascent, which is like crazy to me. Um, and so there's three signs of imminent death, just to be aware of. So like loss of function, loss of prestige, and loss of competence. Um, so loss of function basically means that if the language does not serve the purpose of day-to-day use, such as texting, emails, and even like, well, especially like in a business setting. So if you can't use uh, this language to communicate for business or even just like to communicate through text and stuff like that, then it doesn't have a function digitally. And then loss of prestige. So basically, this article kind of talked about how it's the younger generation that's using the internet, and the older generation um, just basically they're not using the internet as much, and so the younger generation kind of gets to choose what language is used, like what language is cool, because the digital way of communicating is the most prestigious, which is I thought that was interesting too. So they kind of said like if it's not on the internet, if it's not on the web, that doesn't exist. That's kind of a mindset of a lot of people online. And then so finally the loss of competence. Um, so if you want your language to keep going digitally, like you need to raise your kids and teach them not only the language but also like digital, how to use like the digital platforms and just how to be like technical, sorry, just like inclined towards that and like using the language just online. So it's kind of interesting. Um, so yeah, these are signs that just are relevant when viewing language death in the digital age. So the thesis of the article is that the vast majority, so over 95% of languages, have already lost the capacity to ascend digitally. And so if they're digitally dead, they're just not serving the communication needs of the language community, which is hard to wrap my mind around in the age that we live in. So the way that they measured just kind of just if people are online and their presence online is through like Facebook, through just like Skype, texting, Wikipedia. They emphasize that there's a lot of hindrances for smaller language communities to thrive. So like on Wikipedia, you have to have a community. Like if you want to use your language to create like a web page or to add insight into a web page, like you have to have a language community of like a certain amount of people. And so certain things like that make it really hard for digital ascent, which just basically means like people can use their language and then bring it to the internet. So first of all, like some people don't have some language communities don't have digital skills. And then secondly, like certain platforms make it really hard for people to use their language if they don't have like that like a prestigious language. So for me, I thought this article was like super interesting, but I felt like it lacked in just like preventative measures of language death in the digital context. It emphasized that there's a lot of measures that people take, and that like linguists take to stop language death in the natural setting, but they don't talk about, the article never talked about how to take those measures digitally. And so I just kind of am like leaving that up to you guys. Like if you guys have any ideas of what are like ways that you could encourage other just encourage languages and communities to use language. Does that mean like giving people technology to use their language and user-friendly platforms? And then is this something that's important? Like what if it doesn't serve the needs of the community? Should we worry about it? Should we be concerned about it? So I'm just kind of like leaving that to you guys. So